Hello and a warm Collisions YYC. Welcome to my guest this morning, Miss Rosa Twyman. How you doing, Rosa?
I'm great. How are you, Tyler?
I am so good. It's a beautiful summer day in Calgary. It's plus 30 out. We're going to talk about the grid integrity and our reliance on the things we just expect to work, meaning our energy infrastructure. It's going to be a wild conversation, Rosa. I'm really looking forward to it.
Me too. It's really important stuff.
It is very, very important things, and things that we can very easily, I think, just as individuals going about our day, can take for granted. So before we get into that, there's the teaser for the episode. You're founder and principal at Regulatory Law Chambers. So let's just do a quick, let people into the tent, into the elevator. What is Regulatory Law Chambers? What do you do in the world? And then let's let the conversation unfold from here.
Regulatory Law Chambers is a small boutique energy regulatory law firm in Calgary. We specialize and do only energy regulatory work. I do a lot of electricity work, both on the tariff side and on the market rule development type matters. And then I also do oil and gas. Mostly on the gas side, I do a lot of rate regulation type matters. Okay, I like the rate regulation matters, which is really nerdy, but I love that stuff.
I love, that's why I love having people on the show that kind of operate in what would be easily perceived as niches. It's like, no, I love it and I geek out about it and it's super fun. Who'd your clients be? Just to can you give context? Is that a way to help the audience understand who you would work for?
Yeah, so I would work for companies that want to take positions in the industry on maybe what a market rule would look like or what tariffs they should be paying under a regulated rate tariff. I work for industry, large organizations, large companies, and I help them navigate both the regulatory landscape and I always have to work with, in essence, a public interest test. Everything I do needs to be compliant with what the law requires of the industry. But we also want to set them up for business success. So we try and, thread the needle between those two objectives. And often the matters that we do have long-term impacts on a company's business ventures. So it's really important that those pieces fall in place in the right ways.
And you're based here in Western Canada. You're in Alberta. Do you work all across the country, or is it global, or do you focus more based on? Because I know different jurisdictions have different regulatory frameworks and so on and so forth.
So when it comes to the electricity matters, I mostly appear in matters before the Alberta Utilities Commission. So I will give advice on matters that's regulated provincially under provincial laws and regulations. When it comes to the gas side, I do work before the Canadian Energy Regulator, and I act for a number of utilities out of the United States who are large gas shippers on the NOVA system.
Oh, interesting. So you have a fairly wide and large, but also deep preview into terms of what's going on. When we talk about electricity versus gas, and I don't know if this is the right way to ask the question, is there an area that's more tumultuous right now, or that's more, I don't want to say the word problematic, but where there's more things happening? Where are you the most busy? And then let's kind of dive into maybe what's driving that, and also the understanding of the business case, but also eventually how does it land for consumers? Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Tyler, this is a fascinating question. Actually, I'm always, I won't say I'm perplexed, but I'm always intrigued. Let me use the word intrigued.
Excellent word.
Yeah. So, before I actually answer your question, I just want to give you some context. So in the context of, systems that are regulated, like large infrastructure projects, we got, whether it's a pipeline, a large transmission system, or wires, those are often regulated. So, analogy that I draw in my mind, that's more like a socialized system. You build one, everybody uses it, you try and optimize that use because it makes logical sense. You don't want to build 5 pipelines and cut the country up with 5 pipelines when one pipeline will do the job with those impacts. But that means that a regulated entity can only make a regulated return, and that regulated return is set by its regulator. And so we see, for example, in the gas industry, you have large pipelines. The rates that are paid on them are, needs to be subject to the test, which is called just and reasonable rates, not unduly discriminatory. In the electricity industry, you have, large transmission lines, infrastructure. Those, the use of those transmission systems are also regulated. Same test, just and reasonable, not unduly discriminatory. So this is what I really want to say is it's the same test, but the way they get applied is so different because that's where I wanted to go. And I wanted to give that context because the electricity side is just so much more politicized. It's so much more impactful. It makes headlines in the news. So I find that there's more, political attention paid to it. Also, to be fair, I think there's less competitors when it comes to providing transmission lines versus pipelines. Potentially maybe that's a difference, but same test, very different application, way more controversial in the electricity industry.
And is it because the average consumer that you talked about, there's a deeper political will, which usually is tied to your constituents, your voters, what's important to them? How do you need to be seen then as a politician supporting or executing on the will of your people to make that sound very altruistic, which I don't know if it always is. Is that often why that ends up a little bit more in the spotlight because it's more connected versus the natural gas piece that's maybe a little bit more out of sight, out of mind? Or am I drawing the completely wrong conclusion in my head?
No. So there's various, in my opinion, this is totally my opinion. This is maybe not what many people think, but there's various factors that come into play. So, as an electorate, do you want to do what the people's will is? I think there's no problem with that. The problem I have is how informed are the people. And so, as an example, if you want to say to your people, please vote for me because I am going to expand on a green agenda. I have a problem with the word green even, but it's just what we, colloquially or generally refer to as a green agenda. If you say to people, please vote for me because I'm going to ensure that there's more greening of the grid.
Yes. Those are common words I think most of us have heard in the media. Yeah.
I have no problem with constituents voting for that. I do have a problem with not telling constituents that the electricity bill is likely going to go up 4 or 5 times. So
4 to 5 times. Ouch. In a world where we've already seen an increase in our electricity bill over the last handful of years. Is that correlated to that? Or is that just part of the increase of cost of the world we live in over time?
Okay, so let me not tie myself to the 4 or 5 times. It might be more. It depends on how you look at it.
All right. Fair enough.
But let's look at it. Just
there's going to be an increase.
Yes, let's look at it factually, just logically, directionally. If I have more renewables on the system, for example, a wind farm, a solar farm, really good for emissions reductions, a good objective, no problem. The reality is when you have that, those resources do not supply energy to the grid 24/7. There's improvements that can make now. They can marry them with batteries or there's various ways they can help with that situation. But let's, for this example, say renewables don't provide electricity to the grid 24/7. So then, in the past, we had good baseload generation, coal-fired. We were phasing those out. No problem there. Now we have, gas-fired, which can be on the grid 24/7 if it's needed on the system. Your gas-fired generator is built somewhere in the province, and your wind and solar is going to be built where the resources are. You're going to build it where the wind is, where the sun is. So if an effective factor of a renewable resource is, let's say, 30%, meaning it only produces electricity 30% of the hours in a year, there's 8750 hours in a year, it means that the other times, other resources are going to need to provide the electricity to the grid if we want to have electricity for 24/7.
Yes, which I would argue that most of us do. I think we can work as that as a shared assumption. I'm going to be so bold.
I think that's a fair assumption. I mean, there's such a correlation between the growth of the economies and the
access to energy,
access to electricity. There's always that fine that line that says there's a fine line between chaos and civilization, and that fine line is electricity. And, I come from South Africa. I've seen what's happened to South Africa with its economy, with electricity. That's a whole other topic. But I'm very pro reliability. as you,
I appreciate
it's really very important. I'm pro efficient reliability. And when you speak about pro reliability, efficiency does not only mean the electrons that needs to be produced that we use every day when we switch on a light or, run something on electricity, but it also means the electricity doesn't just jump from a generator to your house. It gets transported over a bunch of wires. And so your landed cost of electricity is made up of both of those components, the actual electricity that's produced and also the wires. So just coming back, for example, a renewable resource, its operating costs would be very low because it doesn't have to burn gas to produce on an ongoing basis. It'll have
technically its inputs are free, solar and sun and wind, when there's sun and wind.
Yeah, fair enough. If you want to think about that. So let's say the cost to produce that is not, is less compared to a gas-fired generator that has to buy gas,
Because in that case, you're turning an energy source into another type of energy source. The gas is something we have to go and get, and there's a cost there, where the wind blows when it blows and the sun shines when it shines.
Exactly. But so that part of it is maybe good for the commodity part. But then we need, let's say we had one wire that used to run to a baseload generator, and we use that wire, 90% a lot of the time, because the generator that was connected to that wire produced energy close to 24/7. But now we have to have that because we need the reliability, but we also need to have the wires to all of these other renewable generators that have much lower effective factors. So instead of using one wire, maybe we use 5 wires now to do the same, to have the same amount of reliability. So just logically, so this started by us saying maybe our electricity bills can be 4 to 5 times higher. If you just think about it logically, there's impacts to whatever choices we make when we produce energy. And it's really important that we consider all of these impacts when we say we want more renewable energy. No problem with renewable energy, do we know? There's a saying, somebody really wise told me, said you can have whatever you want, or you're prepared to pay the price for what you want. And I think we need to really carefully look at both sides of the equation when we ask our constituents to vote for something that we ask them to vote for.
And would you say, from your point of view, being involved in this, is a marketing rhetoric, a policy? It sounds like this is an example of where necessarily the full story or reality didn't fit a narrative that was generated. And hey, does everyone want better, more renewable, environmentally friendly? Absolutely. But to your point, we're not getting the next part of that story. It's like, oh yeah, but are you okay if we build all this extra infrastructure? Whoa, wait a second. You didn't ask me that part of the question. And this feels like the narrative around, well, of course I want it to be better. It kind of felt like it caught its own energy and its own momentum, but it wasn't always based on, to your argument, the full story. And one part was really convenient to tell, the other part less convenient, so we're just going to not tell it. I'm making it sound very deliberate, but it's hard not to think there's some deliberate storytelling in there.
I cannot really comment on that because I wasn't part of those, those, whatever those policy decisions
we're speculating, Rosa. This is just where you and I speculate. I'm asking a lawyer to speculate. She's like, no, Tyler, I'm not going to speculate on that question.
So, but what I see on the ground is it doesn't look to me like the full story is always told. And I don't agree with that. And there's another wrinkle in that because you also have federal government objectives and federal government commitments and how that flows through and what we need to do on the ground in the end. And I have a lot of respect for the system operators because in the end, the system operators deal with a system. So you have all of these. I mean, you have the transmission tariffs, how much it costs to run those wires and, transmit that electricity over the wires. Mm-hmm. You have the energy commodity price, and you want to send good price signals there that are transparent so people understand what they are, because money is a language that we all understand. We all understand price signals. We have these decarbonization goals, but the one thing that you can never argue with, and it's a little bit like the Tao Te Ching. It sounds like I regress or, just get sidetracked, but you cannot argue with the physics of the system.
Right.
The physics are the physics are the physics, and these system operators have to deal with the physics of the system, and they have to keep the pieces together. Logically, if you think about it, electricity is like a big tub with a certain level of water, and the same amount of water needs to go into that tub as the amount of water that goes out. So you've got all of these hoses going in and all of these hoses going out, and the system operator has to keep that water level at the same level. Otherwise, the system, we get brownouts, and there's nothing worse than a brownout news headline.
No, nobody wants that. Is this where the risk comes in, or where it's so important to have all parties at the table looking at the complete situation, so we don't follow a certain storyline or a certain directive and end up, because like you said, these are long-term, they're large infrastructure, they're big changes with extended and extenuating circumstances and consequences if we're not looking at that whole system holistically. Chasing a rhetoric or a messaging strategy or this is the right thing to do, but yet we're not looking at those third-party consequences. Mm-hmm.
I think the important thing is, let's start off with, do we want reliable electricity?
Yes, I'm going to boldly say yes on behalf of my listeners.
All right. So if we agree on that, then the question is, what do we need to get reliable electricity? And then I would say, after that, how do we get that in the most cost efficient? Let's speak about this affordability thing. That is another thing that drives me nuts, Tyler. What does affordability mean?
That's very subjective and very personal.
Yeah, what's affordable to you? What's affordable to me? What I'm prepared to pay? What you're prepared to pay? It's a very, like, how do you define? I mean, sometimes they take measures of you if you pay a certain percentage of your disposable income. Is it affordable? Mm-hmm. Is it not? But you know what? That is such it's hard to grab that and define that. And so now we are going for this goal of affordability, but what is this goal really? I mean, one of the big things that they teach you if you have goals, define your goals. Make sure what they
need to be smart. They need to be smart goals.
Yeah,
yes, they do.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's such a general principle. Sounds way nicer to say affordable electricity than efficiently produced and delivered electricity. But what we're really after is efficiency. And there's different philosophical principles around that. I like the concept of optimizing between, if you want to call the transmission system a socialized system that's regulated, rate regulation is set there. I do think if that's done right, we have more than 100 years, I think now, of precedent on what rate regulation is about. If that gets applied, the law there gets applied properly. I'm also a big proponent of the rule of law, which I think we have issues with sometimes too now. If that gets applied appropriately, and if we have real competition on the producing the commodity side, so competitive market forces in the electricity industry, we call it fair, efficient, and openly competitive. All things equal, if you combine those two, you should be getting the most, I'm scared to use this word, quote unquote, affordable electricity.
Based on, to your point. But it doesn't sound like you feel that we are. I'm sensing I'm sensing an asterisk behind your comment.
You know what? I have to tell you, the Alberta system operator has set out the new REM design, and I think they're really trying to thread the needle between these issues. And I actually think it's because we went through that process last year, and there were significant issues with the design. They took comments from everybody in December. Actually, people filed their comments in January. And the design that they've set out in May, I think it's hugely improved. They have again, like I said, the Alberta system operator, there's a lot of really smart people in the electricity industry, Tyler. Like, I can tell you that. And they know their stuff. So I think people could be assured that there are people that's keeping an eye on these issues. And I do think that people are aligned on, the reliability side. We're figuring out how we're going to get those efficient use of the transmission system and efficient pricing of and those two actually need to, you can't have an efficient pricing on the transmission system, but it thwarts sending an efficient price signal on the commodity side. So those two actually also need to play together. So it gets tricky, but they are really, really smart people in the industry that working really hard to figure this out. And the other thing you need to remember too is electricity is you can't just tomorrow build a whole gas-fired generator and build a transmission line. These projects are large. They're lumpy. So you suddenly add a large amount of, the peak system is around, peak system needs is around, I think, 12,500 megawatts. So you add a 3,000 megawatt or 6,000 megawatt unit to the system, it really, really moves over the supply curve is, you're sticking in another unit there, and it has an impact on the prices. But these units are supposed to make their money over a very, very long period of time.
How long typically? Are those 20-year, 25 or 50-year amortizations?
Yeah, so different technologies have different expected lives. I think nuclear is even modeled on 60-year lives. And so 20 years, 30 years, there's different things. And sometimes they can even extend their lives at the end. Sometimes it doesn't make sense to do that. But they have long lifespans. And so in the short run, they need to make they call them their short run marginal costs. They need to at least cover their costs. But in the long run, they need to also pay off the capital. It would be equivalent to saying you pay all the your daily costs for your house, your electricity, the interest on your mortgage payment, your property taxes, etc. Generators have those costs too. But over the long run, you also need to pay off the capital on your mortgage. And so they need to make enough money to cover both the capital component, like equivalent to, you don't want to, after 20 years, have just covered the cost of your mortgage, and your mortgage is still, whatever you have.
100%, yeah. And the value of things and what you built now and what that cost 20 years from now. There's a lot of factors into the complexity of that conversation.
Exactly. So when people are making investment decisions, they look at how they're going to cover both the capital costs. I'm very oversimplifying it, but also cover their everyday costs and
you need to run the business tomorrow, and you need to have it make sense on a longer term horizon because it's a long-term capital project.
Exactly. So just again, an impact on renewables. So if renewables are reducing the pool price, so you're paying renewables have to offer net $0 an hour. So they generally suppress the pool price during the hours that they produce. So if you're
supply goes up, simply playing the supply and demand curve.
But also supplied at a offered in at a very low cost. But so then you're a gas-fired generator. So you used to be able to, for example, I use broad strokes here, but you used to be able to produce out of 8750 hours. You used to be able to produce your energy, let's say, 80% of that time.
Yeah.
But now, so you had 80% of 8750 hours to pay off your short-run marginal costs, so your everyday costs, if you want to call that, and also your capital costs. But now, because during the time that the sun shines and the wind blows, the renewables are displacing the energy from, for example, that gas-fired generator. Now that gas-fired generator only produces, maybe, let's say 30% of those 8750. So now over those 30% of hours, it needs to make enough money to still pay off the same costs. Sometimes even more, because you have to switch it on or off to do.
I was going to say you're not spinning it up and spooling it up and spooling it down for nothing. And then the problem is, as a consumer or as a user, the second that the wind stops blowing and the sun stops shining, I really need to know that base load generator is there and available and can be spun up at the drop of a dime. And this is where things sounds like they get very tricky.
Exactly. So you need to make sure that generator is available and can jump onto the system and produce the energy that you needed. But the cost of keeping that generator on the system now is per hour is probably going to be higher because they need to make their money in less amount of hours.
And as a consumer, you're expecting a fairly consistent rate. It might go up, it might go down a little bit, but you're not seeing it swing like you're getting cheap power between 8 a.m. and 12, and then you're getting more expensive power. But this time of day, like from a consumer perspective, that's a lot of regulation to harmonize that whole system.
Yeah. So I mean, that's what I'm saying. What are our objectives? What are our goals?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do we clearly define
reliability, and then affordability in that order? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and I would say reliability and efficiency.
Efficiency, yes, a better word. What is our balance? I understand that the renewables that play a part in Alberta is quite high in terms of the percentage. What do you know off the top of your head? What percentage of this is our load? This is what we need. This part is serviced by renewables now versus let's just say natural gas.
I can tell you that I actually have the numbers pretty handy. I can grab it for you. Sorry, I should have done that.
I've heard, I had 30% in my mind, and I don't know if I picked up that number somewhere. I can't remember who told me that number. The challenge with doing a lot of podcasting is you talk to a lot of people, and a lot of people say a lot of things. Some are true, some are what they knew at the time.
You know what? I looked at the resource adequacy report of the AESO just yesterday, and the reason why I'm hesitant is that I think the installed capacity is about 4,500 megawatt, but I don't know what percentage that is of the total installed capacity of the system.
It's certainly it's a rabbit hole we can go. If we're curious enough, I bet the internet has that information for sure. But
you know what, Tyler?
I put you on the spot, Rosa.
No, that's okay. But keep asking me questions. I'll find a document that I looked at yesterday that will give me better context.
Curious about the moratorium that was put in place around renewables, and I'm assuming this was something you were involved in, or certainly had many conversations about, and how that played into the story and the balance that we're talking about here. And certainly, a lot of people felt that was a harsh thing to do, and it was holding us back. But yet I've talked to other people, they're like, no, that was the common sense thing to do, where we could take a pause and think. I don't know enough to have a point of view on that.
So on the moratorium, I don't agree with people have certain So I'm going to give you context again on that. As I said, I'm a great believer in the rule of law. And if you just sideswipe somebody with something that they didn't expect, because we're supposed to be able to read the rule book. I know maybe it sounds idealistic. We're supposed to be able to read the law book and look at that and say, okay, based on these laws, these regulations, these ISO rules, these operating procedures, if I build this resource, it's fair for me to assume I'm going to be able to produce these numbers of hours at this cost structure, which means over this amount of years, I should be able to pay off my
you can run your numbers with a degree of confidence. Mm-hmm.
That's right. And I can go to the bank, and the bank could look at that and go, oh, there's some certainty there. Based on that, I'm giving you a lower interest rate, and you should be good to go to pay off your loan.
Yeah, whatever it costs to put this project into action.
Exactly. So if you have somebody that just changes the law on you like that overnight, it creates a lot of uncertainty in the industry, and that has knock-on effects.
Yeah.
And if we want to have long-term reliability in the system, we need certain rules that we can understand and apply. The banks understand them, industry understands them. So, a reaction like that could really chill investment or people's faith in the industry, etc. And we see that. And that's not good for long-term reliability, which is not good for consumers.
In a sector that is built on long-term planning, 20, 30, 50, 60-year returns, and you've got a 6-month, speed bump thrown in the middle of a 25-year journey.
It's a sideswipe. I think that's a sideswipe. Did the government, the reason of the moratorium, if you ask me, I still will say the ASO tariff is not sending the right price signals. We were involved in that. And so, Tyler, there's context to how this all played out. The system was set up so that you have full access to the transmission system. They called it an uncongested system. Similar to a road, if you want to get your shoes to market, you need to get onto the road. Because if I don't put a road to your factory versus I put a road to somebody else's factory, one party will be able to get their shoes to the market, but the other party wouldn't. So the concept is that we build an uncongested system. Wherever you want to produce energy, we'll build the transmission lines to that. And so all things equal, that would mean that we would have more competition. So all things equal, that should reduce the electricity price. And that should offset the increased investment in the transmission system. So when that was put in place, I don't know of any other systems that has a non-congested system in place. That's being changed right now, by the way. But I'm just giving you context for how we landed in the moratorium. Then what happened is it was supposed to be everybody competes on this, getting on these roads to get the electrons to market and sell them. And so everybody competes based on an electricity price. But then what happened is an externality came into play where if you're a renewable resource, you could also get a renewable energy credit, this other income that went to renewables that made them in certain ways more competitive than a traditional, a traditional generator that is not renewable. And so the non-congestion policy. So then renewable would build wherever they need to build, and we had to build transmission to them. All I'm trying to say is if that renewable credit didn't come into play, maybe we would have built a different non-congested transmission system.
Okay.
Because it sent a signal, build more renewable. And so two things send a signal, build more renewables. It's a non-congested transmission system. And, this renewable energy credit on top of the electricity price that you're getting. And so then you have a price signal that says build more renewable. The more renewables you build, you actually need a price signal that says build some dispatchable resources that could play with the renewables so that when the renewables don't show up, the dispatchable resources could show up. But because the price signal said build more renewables, the pool price went down. When the pool price goes down, it sends a signal, don't build more dispatchable resources because they wouldn't be able to make their short-run marginal costs over the long term, including also the long-run marginal cost. So you're having actions here, price signals that says build more renewables, but you don't have the corresponding price signal that says build more dispatchable resources.
Which if I extrapolate that graph out, what I hear now is an increased chance 10 years from now, 5 years from now of brownouts. Is that fair when I run? Because we get an off balance and
I hope it's 5-10 years. We've seen some EEI events last year.
Okay.
And
yeah.
I think the ASO is taking that very seriously, and they're, doing their best to work with industry to fix these price signals. And it seems like one of the ways that they are going about it, which makes sense to me. I'm not an economist. I'm a lawyer, just to preface that.
Thank you for clarifying, Rosa.
One of the things that I didn't speak about is when you produce electricity, we sell the electricity commodity, but we also need the system to have ancillary services. So, for example, if renewables drop off, and they could drop off very quickly because the wind suddenly stops to blow, you need other resources that ramps up very fast to make up when that drop happens. Because like I said, remember that bathtub's level of water needs to be equal. Like there's very little slack that they can play. On the gas system, the system has a lot more slack when it comes to the pressure that needs to be in the pipeline. Electricity system, very little. Like there's not a lot of room for going out of the parameters that's required. So you need ancillary services to deal with. You can call them uncertainty reserves or whatever you want to call them. And so if you pay these dispatchable resources for the reliability attributes that they provide to the system, then maybe we can get the right price signals to have both, the renewables play with the dispatchable resources. But again, it's an affordability issue if you want to come back. So how do we do that efficiently?
It's certainly easy to understand in talking to you and how knowledgeable and how well you're explaining it. The average consumer hearing, oh, green, we'll go back to your comment about having green good, the way we've done it before is bad, versus going, well, no, let's really understand the role, the balance, how these all integrate together. But that's a much longer story to have to understand and think about as a consumer when you just grab the word green, which has been very heavily marketed to us in the last 15 years, 10 years, which I know you quickly said, I have a problem with that word, which I put a star beside. But the average consumer, do you find, are we at a place now, and maybe I'm getting outside your realm of expertise, where the consumers have seen increases in cost, and maybe I've heard some reports that people are really a little bit less concerned around green as long as they can afford it, and that there is a balance there. It felt maybe 5 years ago like that storyline was a lot more of a headline, and it seems to have dropped down the page now. If I'm thinking very deliberately about looking at a headline, green was at the top. It seems to be lower down, but the full understanding of the story, it seems that it's beyond most people's willingness to probably take the time to learn. And that's my own speculation, just talking with people that I know.
So I do think that there's been a major shift. I mean, I was concerned about it many years ago. I do think people feel it in their pocketbook. And so they're looking at it more closely. And I do think that there's green is not as high a priority as, we've got housing problems, we've got grocery problems. People are dealing with that on a daily basis. And I think those are really important things. We live in a first world country. I think, if I recall correctly, I didn't have this conversation with her recently, but one of my friends is the CEO at In From the Cold, and I think 20% of the people that come and get their food at In From the Cold are people who are employed full time.
Interesting.
That should not be happening in these worlds, Tyler. We have highly educated workforce. We have wonderful resources. We can do better.
Yes, we can. We have other problems and other concerns that you're right in the last 5 years have really percolated to the surface in a way that the luxury of, and also I think that, we've had an energy abundance for so long. It's also very easy to take it for granted, where a lot of the world, to your point, there's a direct correlation between access to electricity and power to economic growth for everybody and lifting people up.
Exactly.
But yet we're in some ways we're pushing ourselves down in a false way almost.
I don't agree with the way that the federal, I'll just say it outright, I don't agree with the previous federal government's policies. I don't think I don't want to use the Trumpism, put Canadians first. I do think there's an ability for Canadians to develop our energy and also help with the development of the rest of the world. That's a whole other discussion. But we have the technology. We have always very responsibly developed energy in Canada. And the other thing I think that I haven't brought up, but I think it's really important to think about too, is a very close friend of mine is a professor at the university, and she specializes in critical minerals. And that is also something we don't always think about, because it's very easy for us to say, oh, I'm doing such a good job. I'm producing green energy through wind power. But those blades were produced in China. And the last time I looked at that, I believe China's grid is produced 60% with coal fire generation. So we really need to think about, it's nice to just look at what we do on the ground here, but emissions don't follow jurisdictional boundaries. On top of that, I explained to you why we would need so many more transmission lines with the green transition, energy transition. It also means we need to use more copper. Where do we get that copper? We mine it in Africa. Yeah. In Africa, they really don't care about biodiversity impacts. They kill the apes. They don't really care about human rights violations. So again, we can.
And you talked about China. When you look at world global supply chain, China is playing a huge role in Africa as well. So China has their fingerprints all around on a lot of it. This is another podcast we're about to have here. But if you want to look at the Chinese influence and the way they're playing into infrastructures, and often come to countries where they're quick to take the money, and then all of a sudden now they have China as a business partner. And there's definitely some deep rabbit holes if you want to read about that as well.
Yeah, it's really, and it's just what I'm really trying to say is Canada has a lot of respect for environmental impacts. I think our human rights, we have some issues. I still can't understand why
we do, but it's better than some.
Aboriginal people don't have water. There are people in our country. It's such a basic need. So, but that's a whole other conversation.
Which just seems like it just makes absolutely no sense when you say that out loud.
It doesn't. But Canada is positioned and has the resources, has the technology, has the education. We have the workforce, we have the space, we have the resources, we have everything. We should be able to have people gainfully, responsibly employed and produce really good energy for the rest of the world as well.
I've had a few gentlemen on the show made the comment of, if there's a last barrel to be pumped, it should be Canadian. And I know that's not exactly what we're talking about, but I think it sums up our track record for all of those things you just said in a very sound way. Yeah. We could go down a few different roads right now, but I'm going to ask something that I'm just curious about. You commented about it early, and you made the comment about nuclear. It seems like any future we want to point to where we're going to be more zero, whatever. I want to be careful with all those promises that were put out there, but nuclear feels like it needs to be at that table if we're going to reach any level of, highly effective molecule of energy, but not in my backyard. I don't know. What are you hearing, or what are you seeing around the conversation around nuclear? Or do you have a perspective on where it may show up over the next, 5 to 25 years?
I think nuclear is a very good addition to the supply mix. Tyler, I'm truly an all of the above solution person.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that's a great way to refer to yourself. Yeah. I'm an all of the above.
Yeah. So do we need to look at that and look at, I think it's an efficiency analysis. And it's, establish your goals, whether reliability is your first goal or affordability is your first goal, but establish your goals and then see what makes sense. I mean, nuclear is still expensive. Those have very long lives. I think nuclear is make leaps and bounds in safety. I personally don't see a major issue with safety when it comes to nuclear.
The problem is when it does go wrong, it gets Netflix specials made about it. So it's certainly the jaws of the energy world. But if you look at history and like from the early 50s, like it's not a new technology in any way, shape, or form. Mm-hmm.
No, and they've taken those issues into account now.
Yes.
They've tried to engineer around it. From what I know, I wouldn't say I'm a nuclear specialist, but I am pro-nuclear, and I am, like I said, I think it's a wonderful addition to the supply mix. Also, with the modulars, you can do a lot with maybe avoiding additional transmission costs. Remember how I said you need
because you can localize your energy source, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so there's a ton of trade-offs that you need to consider when you consider these, and I think we need to do that. And
When
nuclear is great to add.
When you're having conversations at the regulatory level or at the government level, it sounds like there's just so much. Like, I appreciate you said they're very smart people, but they're also managing a lot of information. They're trying to manage it. They're extrapolating that information out into the future. We're talking about wind. We're talking about solar. We're talking about, obviously we've phased back on coal, natural gas generation, grid. It just feels like, we're going to bolt nuclear in. It feels like that could easily get kind of kicked down the road with trying to solve the problems that we have now. But this is, I think, an example of when's the best time to build something 20 years ago, but if not then, how about now? It feels like it's like that type of a conversation because you're talking about these long horizons. Mm-hmm.
It is, but in the end, the money is going to determine what doesn't make sense, because you can say whatever want to. You can say whatever. We can have this green agenda. We can have what consumers want. We can have, whatever transmission policy we want. If the banks don't give us the money to do what we want to do, you're either going to need a bank to give you the money, or you're going to have to balance sheet finance it as a company. And both of those parties are pretty sophisticated at determining what is going to and what is not going to make a return on the investment. I'm speaking a return on and off.
Follow the money, Rose. Follow the money.
So it depends on what policies are in place. I'm very much. I prefer to, when we speak about the regulated industry, I think it needs to be regulated properly. The regulated rates, like the regulated utilities, it needs to be regulated. But when we come to the market itself, I prefer as much of a hands-off. Let people duke it out, because the market is smart. You have to make sure that there's not an ability to exercise market power. They call it excessive market power here. It's because we need to make enough. People can offer in above their short-run marginal cost so that they can also make a return on their capital. So
it makes sense for money to even go there in the first place. Mm-hmm.
So I do believe you're going to get the most efficient outcomes if you let competition sort that out, because you have sophisticated parties that know money and they know how to make money, provided they can't exercise market power. You need to put a watchdog in place there. But so is nuclear going to work under that? Then you get, again, you put a government policy in for subsidies or tax credits or anything that messes with that. That is sometimes tenuous because you get a government change. So what happens then to those, subsidies or tax credits? Yeah. And so how do you build that into the risk of your project?
Business does not like insecurity and instability.
Well, yeah. I mean, business wants to make their money, which is, if they don't exist. And that's not for consumers either.
That doesn't happen often in 4-year short cycles when you're talking about energy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, I think there's a case for nuclear. Is it competitive at this stage? I mean, as the technology develops, we all things equal, it should cost less per megawatt to install it. That's usually what happens. But unless there's policy changes or tax credits, like I say, nuclear will become part of the mix or not.
Yeah, based on how it lands.
Yeah.
Curious, when you're looking out, obviously you come from South Africa, you do some conversations in the US. Do you look at jurisdictions around the world and any great examples and any watch out examples that you see when you look at anywhere in the world and go, wow, they did something 5 years ago and now we're seeing it play out and it's not great for their population or their businesses or their economy, or it is. Do you have any examples of good, bad, or indifferent of examples that you've maybe seen or that you're aware of as I'm sure you're out there looking around to see what other parts of the world are doing?
So there's obviously the California crisis that we want to avoid. That was in, many years ago. It was a price signal issue, right? You can always go to price signals.
Are you back in the Enron? Are you back in the Enron era when
some of that? But
the smartest guys in the room. If anyone wants a movie to watch that really makes you cringe on corporate bad behavior, it's a great movie.
Yeah, but again, people follow the money, so you need to make sure that you put the right price signals in place, and so that there's not gaps for people to play. People are always going to try and find gaps, but it's incumbent on the what that legislative scheme looks like to make sure there's the right price signals so you both get reliability and the efficient price signals. South Africa is an example of a terrible energy policy. They didn't keep up with the infrastructure. There's major problems there. I can go on and on about that. It was actually very interesting. I was working on the capacity market in Alberta, which is all about not having unserved energy. You don't want to have a brownout, and what the target is for that, and if that happens, how bad that's going to be. And then I go to South Africa during that period of time, and I was working on the Alberta capacity market stuff, and these rolling brownouts. It's like I can't work on my Alberta work for the next 4 hours because I don't have
because the power's out.
which made me very, I had to work around. It's inefficient. If you want to get
there's intellectualizing something and then there's experiencing it.
Oh yeah, and it's like if I don't get up into the apartment during this period of time, I'm not going to be able to use the elevator. So it affects. And if the electricity is down, it could take you 3 hours to drive about 5 kilometers because the traffic lights don't work.
So not even like critical infrastructure was not even supported. Ugh, what a disaster. What chaos.
We don't know in North America. Yes, chaos. We don't know in North America what that means. And so South Africa is a perfect example of, we had really good electricity infrastructure in place and it worked, and it's completely put by the wayside. I went to Washington, D.C., I think it was last month, the months before. They had the energy conference. They do a really, really good job. And they did really good, I would say, resource adequacy implementation in the United States, in SBP, I think it's KSO too. But it really made a lot of sense to me how they went about it, and they really look at the system, what the system needs under different circumstances, and how they could. The thing with electricity is, so people think about things in such static terms of often, just now or tomorrow, but it changes so much every minute of every day. And so what you need in this hour could be very different than what you need in the same hour tomorrow or 6 months from now. And what's supplied in this hour versus what's supplied in those other hours could be very different. So you need to look at all of those. Like I said, there are really smart people in the industry and they can model all these things.
Well, I'm thinking about
accurately.
this bathtub that we have the perfect balance, but then the input changes and the outflow changes, and it's constantly someone is manipulating that. That's a good visual, because how hard it is to keep that perfect balance without running it over or running empty.
That's exactly right. And it's not just weather that impacts that. It's also a generator could go down, a transmission line could go down. There's so many things that impact what goes in and what goes out of that bathtub every minute of every day.
Well, it's plus 30 or plus 28 in Calgary. My air conditioning is off right now because I had the house open up this morning, got it to cool down. But around 3-4 o'clock this afternoon, my air conditioner is going to kick in, and so are my neighbors' air conditioners. And those factors at play. And as we have more extreme weather, whether it's cold or hot or whatever the case, there's so many factors. And I'm just saying a few out loud to build on what you said.
That's exactly right. And so I think that's really important for people to understand with the electricity system. That changes minute by minute by minute. And the ASO needs to deal with that minute by minute by minute. And they need to have the tools to do that. Preferably you want the right price signals so that they have to deal with that as little as possible. But in the end, they're the ones that has to make sure that bathtub stays at the right level at all times.
We're going to leave all of our listeners with a picture of a bathtub perfectly balanced and all the complexities in which we talked about. Rosa, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing, going a little bit deeper, because it's so easy in our daily lives. We're so busy, and I flick my light switch and it works, or I show up at work. Let's not forget that I show up anywhere. The lights have to be on proverbially for me to be able to function at whatever environment that I'm in, industrial or office, or take the elevator. And then we think about all the variability that goes into that. I do have a lot of respect and a lot of a lot of bandwidth for the challenge that is, and how thankful I am to have, I would say, live in an environment where any energy abundance is my day-to-day belief, or my day-to-day privilege, not like necessarily other parts of the world, as we sometimes have to be cautious of the marketing or the political rhetoric that's getting put out there without always the whole story being told.
That's right. That's right.
You must get frustrated on a regular basis with some of the headlines you see in the news?
You know what, Tyler? I do, and I've decided I'm going to try my best not to anymore.
What does it have the patience to change what you can, and then have the patience to overlook what you are? Something there's a saying, I can't remember what it is, but I think we all know it. Getting wrapped up too much on things that you have no impact on, but yet I appreciate the role you're playing.
Yeah, I can get sometimes anxious because I could see it and go, "Oh, this is going to be a huge problem," and then I feel for the people. You know, Tyler, you can say whatever you want, but if the middle class in any society is the lungs of our economy, and if you don't look after those people, we're going to have problems down the road. And electricity plays a major role in looking after those people.
Yes.
So we better get the electricity piece right.
Because the consequences are severe. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Rosa, if somebody wants to reach out, have a chat with you, engage with you, do you have what's recommend? Is it your LinkedIn? Do you have a website? What's your preferred?
I would say maybe just email me or email me or call me. LinkedIn is also good.
Okay. Do you want to give out your email? You're certainly welcome to if you feel comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to find me. You can just go Rosa Lawyer, Calgary, Regulatory Law Chambers, or any of those combinations. But my email is rosa.twyman@rlchambers.ca.
Perfect. That's easy. I appreciate giving it out and just say, hey, if you want to reach out to me, reach out. I found you on LinkedIn. You're the first Rosa that came up in my search criteria, so you came up right away. LinkedIn probably knew I was chatting with you today because that's how that works. Yeah. Rosa, thank you so much for your insights and for the work you do, and thanks for just coming on and having a conversation. I really enjoyed it. I'm a little slightly more informed, maybe not smarter, but slightly more informed and educated than I was before. So you gave me a lot to think about. I appreciate that.
Anytime, Tyler, and I'm happy to, if you ever need to chat about something.
Oh, as things come up, yes. Rosa, I heard this in the news. What can you tell me? What's the rest of the story?
Yeah.
I will take you up on that.
I do believe that education is such a huge part in society, and I'm a big proponent of. Sometimes the way we act in societies now is we say we like a democracy, but then we don't because of the way we behave. We don't really have faith in the laws or the ways they implement stuff. But I do think a democracy where people vote for their leaders and they're fully informed, I do think, it's idealistic, but a democracy like that could work better than people being manipulated in making decisions that's maybe not in their own interests. Or they think it is, but it isn't. So
the fully informed portion of where it is, who's benefiting from me believing this thing, and being able to consciously ask yourself that question all the time. But I think we live in an era where we need to be asking that question, like, wait, who benefits from me reacting? Who benefits from me thinking a certain way? And really trying to understand both sides.
Yeah. So anything to help people understand stuff, I'm very much for it, because I have my head in the electricity stuff a lot. And I love it. It's
I can tell you do. I can tell you love it very much. That's it's that level of passion required to really take the time to understand it and really be able to operate at a deep level.
Yeah. So there we go.
Rosa,
I'm glad you feel more informed. That's good.
I do. I feel definitely more educated. If that was your goal, 100%, and I hope my audience feels the same way. Also, I encourage people to be curious and go, maybe I don't understand the whole story. Maybe I need to do a little bit of research. And I know that's even a loaded word sometimes. I need to do some reading and corroborate my sources, whether you want to call it research or not. That's a polarizing word right now in our society as well.
Yeah.
Research. Yeah. Where did you do said research, and who were you reading, and what was their agenda? But to your point, it is probably never easier to get information, and it's also never been harder to understand what's quote unquote true from a balanced perspective.
It is. And also when you start to research these things, you run into words like effective factor and ancillary services and short-run marginal cost and long-run marginal cost, and off you go. So it's really dense to read if it's not something that you're working with every day. So I can understand where people go, I have to survive. I have to get my kids to school. I have to pay my mortgage.
Survive is a good word sometimes in the pace of life.
Yes,
Rosa, thank you. Thanks for a lovely conversation. Enjoy the rest of your day. And I look forward to chatting with you again.
Thank you, Tyler. You take care. Bye-bye.